Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who's a cynic. Hope we're doing well. And today we've got another article from Bounding Into Comics, our good friends over there, who have now wrote a story talking about how Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic have released their scores for the Joker film. Now, I'm still a little angry that they're being released this early. I'm still kind of ticked off they did a screening this early because now we've got so many people that know what's happening, who could easily spoil the film, who are already writing reviews. And we all know that once reviews get written, it does start to influence the culture. It does start to influence the movie-going crowd, even though it might not have as much of an impact as some people do think it might have, because obviously Rotten Tomatoes themselves have gone on to change their entire system to protect certain films because of the power they think they have. Again, I will definitely be a person that will say and admit, I used to go to Rotten Tomatoes all the time. I used to always ask, what is Rotten Tomatoes score? And I would always use that as a metric. Now, of course, the difference is that I am that person that looks at both scores. I look at the audience score and the critic score, and then I dive deeper into the actual reviews because that is always going to give you a much better indication of what's what. So it really does tick me off, though, because I don't honestly believe that these scores have as much of an impact, the scores themselves, but the reviews do. I think the reviews absolutely do, because there's going to be some reviews written about the Joker film that are going to turn some people off to it, and then there's other reviews that might turn some people onto it, but maybe for the wrong reasons, because as we all know, critics are no longer just talking about movies. They're no longer trying to break things down objectively. They're no longer trying to simply say whether the movie's good, what's good about it, what's the story like, basic stuff like that. Instead, now it's all about what's the agenda, how can I push my agenda, and I will do everything that I can to push it. Great example of that is the recent shellacking of Dave Chappelle's special, Sticks and Stones. At one point in time, it was given a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. I just did a Google search on it, and it looks like it's up to 17%, but it's so incredibly low. And it's because if you actually dive into the individual reviews on these different sites, because they don't like politically what Dave Chappelle said in his special. And to me, that should have no bearing on whether a special is good or bad. I will say up front that obviously I can't go into too much detail just because of a variety of things that are talked about in the show that are not appropriate for me to discuss on the channel. But the show, as an objective thing about how it's filmed, how it's presented, etc., is very good. It's very well shot. It's very well directed. It's very well put together. I would say that the epilogue is not as much. The epilogue has a lot of really crazy editing, but the main show, which is what they're reviewing here, is a great, well-produced show. And so it's amazing to me that they'll give these ratings so low, and when you dive into what they're saying, it's all about the jokes themselves. And it's also fascinating because these are some of the same people that were going to promote and push that one so-called comedian, the female comedian, who basically just went on a rant, a politically charged rant with no jokes in it whatsoever, and yet on Netflix it was still enabled a comedy, and so many people said, oh my god, she's so brave, oh my gosh, she just took comedy in a new direction, even though that's not what comedy is. Comedy is not about, hey, I'm going to tell you what I think politically, hey, I'm going to preach to you for an hour and a half. No, comedy is, I'm going to tell you jokes. You might like them and you might hate them. But I should not have the ability to be on Rotten Tomatoes critic, have the authority of Rotten Tomatoes critic to say, I will deem this story, I will deem this overall account, this overall special to be bad, to be negative, because I don't appreciate the jokes. It really does just go back to what Dave Chappelle talks about in that very same special, where he points out saying there are people that went to go see his shows that he thought would be offended and ended up being the ones that enjoyed it the most, saw it multiple times. And their justification for it was, hey, you telling jokes about me, you telling jokes about people like me is what normalizes people like me. And that is what it's all about. And guess what? You have to have a sense of humor sometimes in life in order to get through. And so I look at this and I say to myself, how is that going to impact the Joker? Are we going to have a similar situation? Well, the actual scores themselves have been revealed with 37 critics, which is to me a pretty large number to have watched the film a month in advance, no less. Though, of course, it was at a festival, and so I'm sure all of them, as soon as they found out about it, made sure they got their tickets to go over there, because I don't know if that's something that they were given for free or not. But 89% of critics have given it a fresh rating at this point, with 4 giving it a rotten rating as well. The average rating itself being much more important, I would say, a 9.08 out of 10. The Metacritic score, which is always a little bit more telling to me, is giving it a 75 out of 100 with 13 positive, 4 mixed, and 1 actual negative score. It's interesting how it's going to be a lot of the same reviewers, and yet somehow, some way, you have this disparity there. It's because a lot of them just give things very different. Glenn Kenny at Roger Ebert gave it a 2 out of 4 and says, as social commentary, Joker is pernicious garbage. It's not meant to be social. Oh my gosh. You see, it's reviews like that I look at and I say to myself, man, it actually makes me want to see this film even more. I actually go straight to the ones that give it the lowest rating because I want to find out, what are they saying? Why do they hate it? It reminds me just a lot about what happened here. Why did they attack Dave Chappelle's special? Why did they give it such a low score? Why did they hate it? Because they didn't agree with the jokes. I had said in a previous stream, if Dave Chappelle had been telling jokes and they were politically tinged from a specific side of the aisle, right? Dave Chappelle is great because he goes after everyone. He doesn't care what you think. He's going to tell a joke no matter what. And that's what's one of the great things about comedians like him. Yes, his jokes are crude. Yes, his jokes are inappropriate, and I would never repeat them myself. However, he goes after everyone, and I always have to give at least a little bit of respect for anyone that's going to broaden the spectrum a little bit. It's something that late night talk show hosts could actually learn a lot about, because unfortunately, almost every single one of them is become nothing more than a political talking head for a certain political party, which is not their job, which is not what they should be doing. And that's why Dave Chappelle's great, but that's also why they're going after him, because he does not toe the so-called party line. But then you go ahead and compare it to a film like Joker, where a lot of us are excited for it because it's telling the story about one of our favorite comic book villains of all time. Some of us are already kind of concerned because of the current state of Hollywood, the current state of 2019 Hollywood, and also the fact that the person making the movie said that it's not going to tell a typical comic book story. There's some people that in the comments still, even though I said I don't think it's a good enough reason to completely write off a film, have said it doesn't seem to be the comic book Joker, and so I'm not as interested in the film. And I could say, you cannot be interested in a film, but you can't say that a film's going to be bad just because it's not the typical comic book adaptation. I think that a great example, or rather a great comparison, can be made between this and Logan. Logan was not a typical superhero film, and actually, to me, I thought it was one of the best films out there that dealt with the character of Wolverine because it took the character in a much different direction. Joker, it looks like they're going to be doing the same thing, where it's going to go in a different direction. Now, of course, there are a lot of different factors that can determine whether the film will be good or not, but what I can gather from these initial reactions and these initial reviews, with most of them being positive, is that it's a good film with absolutely great acting. When you dive into the reviews themselves, though, to me, that's where it speaks the most volume. Someone who gave it the lowest score, IndieWire. IndieWire is, I don't trust IndieWire at all. So for them to give it a low score, I'm like, whatever. But I also don't trust IGN. So some of us are kind of caught in this in-between where it's like, well, I don't trust IGN. They've become politically motivated. A lot of these places become politically motivated, and we know IndieWire is too. So who do you trust? And to me, when you have two sites that are the same politically saying two different things, that tells me all I need to know, because what that means, most likely, is that there's no politics in the movie. And guess what? That's what we want. That's what most moviegoers want. We don't want to get preached to. We don't want someone saying, this social commentary says this, Mr. Person over Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert should be rolling in his grave right now because of your stupidity, Glenn. No one wants that. As social commentary, Joker is pernicious garbage. Good. I'm glad that it's social commentary garbage, because guess what? We're not going to a movie for social commentary. Can movies have social commentary? Sure. Many films had. The better films, though, are able to slip it in under a great narrative with good character development, which hopefully this film has. So, Glenn Clancy, instead of you talking about the social commentary, why don't you break down the actual objective realities to the film? Why don't you actually break down why the film is objectively good or bad? There's still people out there that say, you can't have an objective thought. Really? So you're going to tell me right now that the movie The Room with Tommy Wiseau is an objectively good film? Or are you going to say, objectively it's terrible, but subjectively I enjoy it? If that is true, which we all know if we have a brain, is indeed true, that a film can be objectively good, but still you subjectively don't like it, then you can apply that to any movie. You can apply that to anything, where you can say, hey, guess what? I don't like Citizen Kane, subjectively speaking, but it's still one of the greatest films of all time as far as it being made. We actually talked about this on the live stream last night. And so I look to these things, and I try and compare the contrast them. I see, okay, Rotten Tomatoes is saying this about Dave Chappelle. Rotten Tomatoes is now saying this about the Joker. Does that mean that one is more trustworthy than the other? And that's why I've determined that Rotten Tomatoes simply is just not trustworthy in general. I would say that you look to the Dave Chappelle saying, yeah, obviously I can't trust these critics, but I would also look to Joker and say I can't trust these critics either. Because these are the same idiots that are giving the 0%, they're giving the low scores to Dave Chappelle's special. Because it's always the same grouping. It's not always the same exact persons that are leaving the ratings, but it's the same grouping. There's only so many Rotten Tomatoes verified accounts. And just recently they said, oh, we just made 600 more people to be valid criticisms, valid critical thinkers over on Rotten Tomatoes. And guess what? It's a very diverse group, and over half of them are women, and we're so proud. So Rotten Tomatoes is not trustworthy by any means. So what does that mean? How do we look this? How do we find out what's true? I go to Metascore personally because I think Metascore is the fairest of them all because it breaks it down by actual scores and grades and not just thumbs up, thumbs down, which is what Rotten Tomatoes is based off of. But even then, I look at the mix, I look at the negative, and I look at the overwhelming positive, and then I look and see what they are trying to say. And I look at what they're trying to push. So you have Guardian saying, what a gloriously daring and explosive film Joker is. It's a tale that's almost as twisted as the man at its center, bulging with ideas and pitching towards anarchy. Again, to me, that says, oh, actually, this seems like a pretty chaotic film. I look at John from Cineview, who says, Phoenix has created a masterful performance of a film which feels like a masterpiece, a cracked masterpiece. Which to me is kind of odd because how can it be a masterpiece if it's cracked? That would kind of defeat the whole purpose. But of course, I'm going off on tangents like I normally do. But overwhelmingly, people say this film has great acting. Overwhelmingly, people say that there's a lot of really great things to love about this film. And all the negative people remind me a lot of the people that are just destroying this. And so I would say Rotten Tomatoes is still very much untrustworthy because they have a broken system. But even when you go to things like Metascore, Metacritic, it's the same critics overall. Again, I say it's not always the exact same people, but there's a lot of shared criticism every single time. But that means also that they're the same people that decided to downplay this. So politics is going to come to play. But the question is, what are they saying? How do we read what they're saying? And what does that mean for the culture overall? Anyway, what else thoughts about all this? Are you excited for Joker? I still personally am. I mean, I'm glad that it's getting positive reviews, but I want those reviews to be based in reality and not in jargon. At least this person that gave it a 2 out of 4 revealed himself to be the shill that he is, revealed himself to be the politically driven person that he is. You know, you also look to Mark Kaiser, who gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Synagogue says, creates its own world of dank, hopeless, urban alienation and tells its own tale of a class-based chaos and its newfound champion. So bringing class into the discussion. See, that person obviously has a little bit more of a political edge to their commentary than they do to anything else. So I look at that and I say, okay, they liked the film. They loved the film even, 4.5 out of 5, and they had a political motivation. So that's why we need to always take every single movie, every single score, regardless of the site that it's on, individually. We need to try to dive into the thought process, right? And that's why I've been trying to do something different with my own website, obmreviews.home.blog. I know it's a crazy name because I don't have the money or time to really invest, a lot of resources into it. But it's a really great resource because it allows people to give honest scores. They can give an objective score breaking down, how they rank the acting, how they rate cinematography, how they rate objective qualities to film. But then at the very end, they can give it a subjective score, A, B, C, D, or F. And I think that's something that all of us probably try and find more sites that do that. If someone else wants to take that basic concept and turn something into it, hey, I'm right there with you. Because I would love for us to find a site that focuses more on the objective thoughts about film than the subjective qualities instead. Because at the end of the day, I think that there is a difference between the two. The question is, do we separate them? And I always try and separate them and say, hey, objectively it's this, subjectively this is my thought. And a lot of times they coincide with each other, sometimes they don't. But I think that's important for us to do so because we have things like Dave Chappelle's special getting torn apart by idiots with political agendas who are now also at the same time propping up films like Joker. And to me, it's something that we should be very careful of, very aware of, because other films in the future, I don't think Joker's one of them, but other films in the future are going to push social narratives, are going to push social agendas that are going to have the aim of trying to dictate and change the cultural view of the world. And with an election coming up in 2020, you know what direction they're going to try and push people in. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this and all the things we talked about in the comments below. If you like this video, smash that like button, give me a subscribe. It helps us a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.